Hello and welcome. All around the world at the moment, teenagers are struggling with stress, anxiety and depression, and never more so than coming through the pandemic and the lockdowns we've had, dealing with missed exams, trying to make life choices, lacking social life. And although in the UK right now we are gradually coming out of lockdown, there is still a lot of additional stress that would not normally be associated with teenage years, on top of the stresses that they always struggle no matter what we're going through in life. Teenagers have got a lot to deal with, and it's very easy for them to feel overwhelmed, panicky, anxious, frightened, and stress, anxiety, depression, and even suicidal tendencies can come into play very, very unexpectedly, and it can also be very hidden. So if you have teenagers or you know somebody with teenagers, do they genuinely know how their teenager is feeling at heart? So I had a lot of problems helping my son through his teenage years, in terms of from the age of 8. My son first tried to commit suicide at the age of 8, way too early. And it terrified me that he was suicidal every single day for the following year until I finally took him out of school. But I didn't understand why he was like it or how to help him through it. I didn't know at that time how to teach him to understand his own emotions. It's not exactly on the school curriculum. It's not something I was taught at school, how to manage my emotions. Teaching children how to manage their emotions just seems to be something that is left for parents to deal with. Schools try to incorporate it, but it's not a specific topic on its own right. So by the time my son was 19 years old, hallucinating, hearing things, unable to connect with what day of the week it was, he had no concept of time, he struggled with money and anything that was an invisible concept he struggled with. How was I supposed to teach him how to understand his own emotions? And I had tried everything within my power. We'd tried the educational plans, we'd tried the doctor's route, we'd tried getting assessments through the system, and we couldn't get the support. We just got letters back saying he didn't need an assessment. We were talking at this time a 9-year-old who was suicidal daily, and the educational system said he didn't even need an assessment. They refused to see him, refused to support him, which was why we took him out of school. But I don't want to see everybody else having to necessarily take the decisions that we did along the way, and would like to see you being able to access support and help more easily, or be able to stick with the system by having your own strategies in place. Bear with me while I get through this. There is a reason for telling you all of this and why it leads to where I'm going. Please bear with me. So by the time my son's 19, we'd had some good years in between, but the teenage hormones kicked in. Other thoughts, beliefs and processes went on in his head from things he'd learned along the way, ideas he'd picked up from friends and social circles that perhaps didn't lead him in the right direction. You know where I'm going. Teenagers are like the blind leading the blind, and when one of them gets something in their head and they share it with the others, they all follow like little lemmings and all go down the wrong path and think adults haven't got a clue what they're talking about. Life's different now, and they don't realise that they can open up safely and share their fears. And that's another really important thing. Think about when you were a teenager. How many things would you have told your parents that were going on in your head and your fears? How many things did you keep quiet because you were afraid of being judged, punished, laughed at, humiliated, dragged off to psychotherapy or locked up? Parents say if you ever think like that, obviously make sure you get locked up, whatever. Or you get a beating, you get grounded, and there's all these consequences. All these consequences of punishment and judgment and fear that stop teenagers from talking to parents. And you're aware that sometimes they might not even be things that you've said directly to your teenager. They might be things they've heard you comment about something on the television. yeah, I don't believe in that because blah, blah, blah. And you might have just made a completely random comment about something on a comedy show or a news program or a film you've been watching. And then if your teenager or young adult, or even your child, it could be younger, or even a grown-up child who's already left home, but if they've heard you make that judgment or bias about something on the telly or on a comment over the phone to a friend, and then they're struggling with something around that, are they going to want to open up to you? No. So how do we reopen those connections and get teenagers to trust parents enough to talk to them? And that is where I had to develop the strategies and the tools when I had a 19-year-old that was like your classic teenage zombie walking around, where somewhere in this body of a teenager that resembled my son didn't quite seem to exist in there anymore. Not the son that I knew that I should be able to have a conversation with. The person who was talking back to me was just like somebody else, a total stranger. And he was rationalising away every single thing I tried to help him with. He was shutting me out. He was shutting the world out. He was refusing to get help. In fact, at about 15 years old, he refused to see somebody to help him for months and months. And I finally got him to an appointment. And on the day when he'd agreed to go, he turned up on a better day, in a good mood, and said, "Oh, I'm fine, Mum's making it all up." And she said, "Oh, in that case then, I'll write you off." And she ticked him off the books. And for the next 5 years, I was left dealing with his meltdowns, his tantrums, his traumas, his dark thoughts, his angry thoughts, and my own son even threatened to kill me. And I know that wasn't what he wanted to do. It wasn't that he hated me. I knew that he loved me, but it was the depression and the stress and the anxiety that was making him that way, not a lack of bond between us. So it wasn't necessarily that, and it wasn't that I'd done something wrong, and it wasn't that I wasn't treating him well, and it wasn't that I wasn't trying to get him help, but I hadn't been given the tools and the tips and the strategies to help him through that. And I, through the job that I had, was doing my own personal development. I was learning about things like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and I was reading books like something about Our Iceberg is Melting and Who Moved My Cheese, and there was these different books that were great leadership, personal development books, and I recognised there were some really powerful strategies in there. But I want you to imagine level ground, right? Level ground being, if you want personal development to get on the ladder to success, you've got to take a big step up in personal development to reach that ladder. And for somebody on level ground, that is a big step to start accessing those leadership levels of personal development. But now imagine somebody stuck in the pits at rock bottom. Their mind is in complete darkness and they've shut the world out. And this ladder to success is up here. So giving them a book of personal development, it's just, there's no connection between the two. It's way out of their league, completely off level. So it wasn't the right way to help him, but I knew there was something in there that could help. But I was still missing something. So through my own personal development and training that I was doing for my job, I was doing a job helping the managers in a corporate environment. I was assistant to a management team who were building an entire offshore wind farm. It was a huge cry from where, on the other hand, I'm trying to support my son through teenage depression and suicide, or suicidal thoughts. And I was balancing the two. So I also know what it was like to live with that stress, the daily stress from both ends, working in a corporate environment and trying to be this parent to a teenager who was really, really, it was like trying to keep somebody afloat and rescue somebody day after day, trying to get them out of the depths of depression and back to a safe ground. And it was like trying to save them from drowning, only for them to the next day turn around and dive back in the water. And this was like day after day after day and went on for years. And no matter who I asked for help, nobody seemed to be able to help him through. Some things gave us a temporary reprieve, some lasted for months. and then he would just go back downhill again. But I needed to teach him how to manage his own emotions for life, not just for a few weeks or months. And so, through all of my personal development, I started to recognise needs that he needed to get to a certain level. So what I needed to do was close that gap and bring the personal development knowledge back down to a level that would help him out of the pits and get him back up to a certain level where we were on neutral ground again and get him to safe ground. So it was about getting him back to a place where I knew he was no longer going to dive back into those pits of depression, where I knew I could walk away and know that when I came back the next day, he would still be safe. And I needed that for me as much as I needed it for him, to know that he was safe, so I could start to live without the fear, the stress, the anxiety, and the depression of being a parent with a teenager like that. Now, my son was also on the autistic spectrum, diagnosed with Asperger's, so it made everything 10 times more magnified. But at the same time, that can also happen in any teenager. When you hit that level of depression, everything negative is so magnified and everything positive becomes so small. It's about rebalancing that and getting that back to that level ground in both ways. And so I realised this, I'm sorry this is going on so long, but I really want to connect with my audience and I really want to connect with you and help people to understand me. I want people to understand where I'm coming from and why I have struggled so much, but now here to help other people not have to go through the struggles that we did and help other teenagers to have a more empowered life and a positive life and gain all the techniques and strategies that we learned in a much quicker time and not have to go through all those years of struggle that we did. I want people to learn from the trauma. I've turned our trauma into triumph, and I want you to learn the same. And here's how. So it was when I was doing training for, I was doing training for award in adult education and training. So I did a training course which was to help me teach other members of staff, because I used to induct staff for the company, and I used to take them through a whole 2-day induction about all the IT processes and the company policies and all the anti-corruption processes, etc. So we used to do 2 days of complete induction for new members of staff at the offshore wind farm. And one of the most valuable things that I realised from that was the 3 learning styles: Audible, Auditory, Visual and Kinesthetic, or VAK as they say it, visible, auditory, kinesthetic. So some people prefer to learn by seeing things, some prefer to learn by hearing things, and some prefer to learn by actually doing things. And it comes down to an old Chinese proverb: what I see I forget, what I hear I forget, what I see I remember, what I do I understand. And for me, when I studied my VAK style through the training, I recognised I was actually a balance of all 3, and it's what actually made me a more powerful teacher, because I could connect with the styles of all 3 types of students, and I could adapt that to people who were working with me through the induction, and I could recognise those styles in them anyway and adapt how I help them through the whole induction process. But this also helped me to realise that my son was a very visible learner, and therefore time, money, measurement, and certainly emotions were all concepts that he couldn't understand and grasp because they were not visible. And I realised that time, even being visible on a clock, was still difficult for him to understand. Measurement on rulers, etc., was still difficult for him to grasp the concept of distance, but you could see measurement on a ruler. How was I meant to teach him emotions when there was no way to show him visibly? So again, there is a way of bringing this around, and I'm now going to bring something on screen, because, bear with me, this is... Sorry, I haven't frozen. Right, starting with this one. I've come on the wrong screen. Right, so I started to realise that he needed a visible way to learn. And it took me about a year, but very quickly as I began to develop this, I saw a huge difference in how he responded to every emotional situation that he came up against. And this here, my mouse is not working properly, is the emotional cycle that I learned to depict. I started to recognise patterns in emotions from everything that I could see, and I started to study everything that I saw in him, that I saw in myself, that I watched on telly, heard in songs, saw on the news, witnessed in colleagues and family, and everything that I encountered every day in life. I started to study in terms of emotions, and I opened my mind up to watching and seeing how everybody responded to everything emotionally. And I very quickly realised that there was this pattern that could be turned into a visual concept. So I taught my son about happy, sad, angry and depressed as the 4 core emotions. And I opened up these conversations with him about his emotions in terms of colour. And then I started to teach him about why he changed between emotions. And we talk about change in terms of inner change, in everything about your thoughts and your beliefs and how you feel internally is all the things that can change internally. They can change negatively and you can change them back positively. And also all the changes that can happen in the world around you, positively and negatively. So it was about looking at the 2 types of change. And this became the first part of my strategy here, the mood mentor model. So I'm going to go back to my other one now. Oops, this one. By the way, this is my son Matthew. That would have been 4 years ago now. This was the day that I did a TEDx talk in Norwich, in Norfolk. And this is the book that I've published off the back of it. But let's go back to this. So the first part was recognising that emotional cycle and giving him a visual way to understand what his emotions were, where his emotional mindset sat at that very moment. Was he angry? Was he sad? Was he depressed? Where did he want to be? Did he want to be happy, motivated or peaceful? And it was finding that journey between where he was and where he wanted to be. Was it changes he could make in himself? Was it changes he could make in the outside world? What were the powers that he had at hand? And if there were changes that needed to be made that weren't within his power, how could he get the help to overcome those challenges? And this is a whole life experience thing that many people take decades to learn. And that's why we're called the wise elders. You know, the older you get, the wiser you get. And for some people, they are really wise in the 20s. But that seems to be very few. There are many more who take to their 30s, 40s, even 50s before they start to think, actually, now I can see the wisdom coming out. But what I realised is there is a strategy to this. And there is a strategy that can condense all of that learning that took me until my 40s to go, oh my God, now I can see the strategy of life and how to manage change. And I came up with a quote. And this is, you know, people use quotes left, right and centre to deal with life's challenges. But I recognised that mastering life is all about mastering change. And that has become my life's motto, is that mastering life is all about mastering change. So that is why I then went on to develop a second strategy. A second strategy around understanding change in terms of inner and outer change, positive and negative thinking. And there are only 5 types of change in the whole world you can face. And that, I'm going to just switch the view here a little bit. That is what's become my acronym of HELPS. So HELPS is the initials for the 5 types of change. And through the strategy that I teach in the Mood Mentor model, in the Brain Unchained book, everything in here is about this. And I'm also teaching it in upcoming masterclasses, and I can provide this through one-to-one support and training as well. But it's through this acronym of HELPS that I teach everybody to understand change in terms of what destruction it can have on us emotionally, as well as what strength and power it gives us in life, and how you can take back control of your own emotions, how teenagers can start to learn strategies rather than going into that panic and fear mode or getting angry and aggressive and violent, is how to start to use that knowledge to purpose instead. And then the third part of the strategy, which took me a little longer to develop, was the keys to flight. Was recognising that everything that changes in life changes because there's a root cause. And if this is a negative change, there is always a root cause behind it. And it's never just something changes and that is the root cause. The root cause is always a separate issue. And it's looking at what that is. And a good example for that is you're driving your car and all of a sudden it changes how it feels. So it's like an emotional shift. Your car shifts in how it feels. And you think, why does it feel differently? It might feel differently because you've got a flat tyre. So what's changed is all the air has come out the tyre and it's gone flat. But the tyre going flat is not the root cause. The root cause could be either the valve is faulty, could be there's a thorn in the tyre's worn, it's gone. So there could be multiple root causes, but you have to find the actual root cause to be able to repair the problem, to repair the change and change things back for the better. So you get back in that car and it feels right to drive again. And the exact same process applies to emotions. And that is where everything that I learned about life strategy and taking the whole universe of problems and saying, these are the 5 challenges we can face. And then, do you know what? These are the 5 root causes. And when you realise what the 5 root causes are, these 5 causes, and that's finance, links, information, time and energy, they become the keys to success. And those 5 root causes help unlock the changes that happen to create positive change, to resolve the emotional cycle and bring everybody back to happier places, to feel motivated, to feel calm and peaceful, to feel excitement and joy, whatever emotion they choose. But first of all, you have to begin with the awareness. How do I feel? Where am I on that emotional cycle? Where do I want to be? Why do I not feel like I'm there? What has caused me to feel in the mindset I'm in? What was the root cause? There's so many questions. But the book, and I'm just going to scroll forward now to the book. I think I've gone the wrong way, bear with me. I will get used to this. So the book Brain Unchained, this includes that entire strategy within a book. And the book is available on Amazon in UK price $15.99. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, you can go and read it for free. Please do. But it is also a workbook style, so they can work through it and learn this strategy systematically to grow a skill for life. And instead of having to take years to learn this strategy through trial and error and just trying to pick up pieces of it along the way, it's all here. It's all here. I've had to do this and learn this to help my own son. I expected this to be a 10-minute video, and I'm really sorry that we're going on for so long. But do you know what? I'm so passionate about this. If you are still watching it, I know it really means something to you too. So this is just literally the tip of the iceberg of what I can touch on in my masterclasses, what's available in the book, or what I can do through one-to-one training with people. So if you are a parent or you know a parent who has a teenager who's struggling and you want to support them, the most important message I want to share next is why parents make the best mentors, and why I want to use the one-to-one and the masterclasses to turn parents into mentors. Because my son had been through the school plans, the educational plans. He'd been through the doctors, the counsellors, the occupational therapists, the psychologists. He'd been to support groups. We'd tried various strategies at home, social stories and all sorts of things. I had run out of ideas. We'd tried the SMART plans. We'd tried physical activity. We'd tried dietary changes. We'd tried everything. And yet, when everything failed and all the professionals gave up on us, It was me as a mum that saved my son. I did not need to have a psychological degree to save my son. I did not need to be a doctor, a counsellor, a therapist. But what I recognised in the end, and I feel sometimes so, I can't reflect on this, but I do reflect at times that I wish I had have seen all of this a lot earlier and understood this so much sooner. Believe me, if you don't even have to wait until a child is in their teenage years to teach them this, but if they're in the teens and going through what we were going through, start here. And what you can't deal with through this may then still need some professional help, but it will certainly narrow it down. So what I recognised was that through using this strategy, first of all, I didn't even have to teach it to my son. I learned this strategy as a parent, and it gave me a toolkit for talking to my son. When I was using the emotional cycle diagram to talk to my son, I wasn't telling him necessarily, oh, you're here, 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 or here, this is what you're thinking, this is what you're feeling, what you're doing. First of all, I had to understand it. And as I had a conversation with him, I was listening. And as I listened, I was thinking, right, so he's feeling happy, sad, angry, depressed. So I would ask him why he's feeling that way, and I would open this conversation up, and I would listen to what changed, and I would talk to him about that. I would talk to him about his options. I would talk to him about all of this strategy. But the first thing was, before he was in a position to be able to access this knowledge himself, it was so empowering to me as a parent to be able to use this, to listen, and it opened up my ability to question him in the right way, to talk to him in the right way, and to mentor him. And as I was able to open that conversation with him, so I was then able to start teaching him little bits of this strategy. And as he started to learn the strategy, he started to change rapidly. And literally within weeks, he started to then help friends. And the ripple effect was powerful too, because when I raised his energy level and his emotional state, so it also affected the people around him. So the ripple effect was powerful. And that was when I realised, when a friend of his walked into a coffee shop, sat down with us, and then just having, again, using this open conversation, I was talking to my son and his friend suddenly says, I've realised that hanging around with Matt makes me a better person. And that was my light bulb moment, that the very thing that I'd done just to help my son I discovered something so much bigger. And I searched and searched and searched the internet, and nothing like this exists anywhere. And I have yet to speak to any professional psychologist, counsellor, therapist, NLP practitioner, doctor, mindset coach. I've yet to speak to anybody that's encountered anything like this, that has the power of this. And I realised that what I discovered is a message that now needs to go back out to the universe. This came to me through recognising the patterns that go on across the entire globe with emotions, no matter what age, sex, race, religion, political view, football team you follow, whatever anybody's beliefs or situation in life, the emotional cycle is exactly the same for everybody. The difference is whether or not we know how to steer it, take control of it, or let it control us. Do you guide your emotions, or do you let your emotions guide you? And that was the difference. My son was letting his emotions steer him down the wrong path. And he didn't know how to take back control of that wheel in his mind. This became his emotional map, his emotional steering wheel, and it guided him back on the right path. Just 6 years later, my son is a completely different person. He has a family. He's got a fiance. He's got a 3-year-old daughter who is so resilient. It is unbelievable. I've never known a child so resilient, so young. And he has another baby on the way. So that's good news this year. We're really excited. He's kept a job down for 4 years. Now, bearing in mind, we were talking a suicidal teenager who couldn't connect with the time of day or the day of the week, to a young man who suddenly went and got a job in a kitchen as a kitchen assistant and waiting, and he couldn't. Considering he'd never been able to access anything more than a social circle of 4 people without getting stressed, anxious, depressed, suicidal because of the autistic side of his Asperger's, to suddenly go into work in a restaurant in a busy, buzzy kitchen and actually cope with it and stick the job through for 4 years, 60 hours a week, through peak seasons, bank holidays, when they were supposed to be closing at 9 o'clock and people were still coming in and their stacks are washing up and people yelling across the kitchen, and he was guiding other people in the kitchen to stay calm, completely the opposite to anything I could have envisioned for him. And now he's working in a factory, and literally within 8 weeks of starting his job, he was on a 3-month trial, but within 8 weeks he's offered a pay rise. He was offered a pay rise within 8 weeks for being a conscientious, productive worker who was actually reaching all his targets and supporting other staff. So I really could not ask more for my son than that. I know everybody said it'd be nice if they're youngsters grow up to have this big successful career, but considering where my son was to where he is now, that's the best success I could hope for him, compared to where I was afraid of him taking his own life or committing crime or doing something else really, really dreadful. And honestly, I couldn't be more proud of him now. But this strategy was a major part of that. And I have studied emotions now over the last 6 years and developed this system more and more and more in my mind. And I spent a year developing just this emotional cycle in terms of understanding the whole dynamics of how we think, feel, act, how we talk in terms of our voice. Our voice goes up when we're happy and down when we're depressed. And in terms of our body language, people who are cheering at a football stadium when their team wins a goal are like, yay! And it's all up this yellow happy bit. And someone who's depressed has got their arms down by the side. Imagine this somebody depressed with their arms down here. And the whole dynamics of emotions in everything we do fits this cycle. And that is what I teach people. Honestly, I could spend a good 4 days just teaching you about this. But I'm going to start with 2-hour masterclasses where I give a much more solid introduction to this instead of talking about all my background like now. So I would cut all of this part out and we'll focus on the emotional cycle. I will give you a really good solid introduction to this because that was the most important part in helping to reconnect that conversation with my son. And then we will do further masterclasses about understanding the emotional cycle in terms of inner and outer change and root causes. I also intend to include masterclasses about suicide awareness, depression awareness, opening up safe space for conversation. Because I actually have, completely separate to this strategy, I have got 10 tips, tricks and strategies for holding that conversation that can help your teenager to open up and trust you. And if you don't think that's important enough, let me just tell you something about a conversation I had this week with somebody. It was outside of the UK, outside of Europe even, but I had a conversation with somebody who said that someone she knows had a teenager who walked through the living room and they didn't acknowledge their teenager. They were not aware their teenager was depressed. They were not aware of how the problems their teenager was having, and they had not had a conversation with what was going on in their teenager's mind. They had no idea. But their teenager walked through the living room, they didn't even say hi to him, and he proceeded to hang himself from the balcony. When they went through his stuff over weeks, months, and over the following year, they found a medical document that said he had, I think it was HIV. And obviously, even with teenagers, do you even know what your teenager is doing sexually and interacting with other people? Are they going to feel confident enough to open up to you that they're even engaging in sexual activity? And then if something does go wrong and they contract STDs of any kind, or have any medical health issue, or any other issue in life, any issue, are they going to come and talk to you? Because these parents are now absolutely beating themselves up. What if they just said hi? What if they just said, how are you feeling? What are you doing? Where are you going? Anything. They could have asked him anything, but they didn't. You imagine how they feel now. And if that was your child, how would you cope with that conversation? Would you feel like you want to know that from your child, that they are struggling with something in life, that they're afraid, that something's gone wrong? You know, they thought they'd go out there and experiment and have fun and learn all the things that teenage hormones lead them down the path of, only to find that they're now faced with a lifelong change of a medical condition that they don't want to talk to you about. Or a trauma. If it's a young girl, what if they've started experimenting and found themselves getting raped or abused, and then they don't want to open up to you about it because they feel shame and trauma from it? Would you not want your teenager, or do you know somebody who'd want your teenager to be able to open up and talk about it? It might be bullying at school. For many teenagers, bring this back to main screen for a minute. For many teenagers, this might even be things like, some teenagers can get suicidal over career choices and university and college. Like, they want to do a particular thing in life because it fits their strengths, their values, their passion for something. But the parents want them to go down the route of medical, lawyer, solicitor, something else, and want them to follow a particular route and career, but their passion is somewhere else. And they're too scared of their parents' judgments and biases to say, I don't want to do this. Or when they do say it, they feel railroaded. And in return, that builds up this resistance and this barrier. And again, these are feelings and emotions that teenagers should not have to feel. And they should be able to feel comfortable in saying what they feel and again, the strategy that is in Brain Unchained through the 5 changes and the 5 root causes. Just think about this. For everything that changes in life and causes a problem, there are people out there who can take control of that and change things back, right? There are changes that can come back. But when you get stuck and something changes and you don't know how to resolve it, you go and get help from somebody else. But when it comes to emotional trauma and emotional problems, people tend not to go and get help and don't always understand the importance of getting help and why. But if your car breaks down, we talked earlier about the flat tyre. So if your car doesn't feel right and you pull over and you go, oh, I got a flat tyre. If you don't know how to change a flat tyre, do you just stand there on the side of the road forever and never deal with a flat tyre? Or do you say, oh, actually, I have got a flat tyre and I need to solve it. I don't know how to do it, so you call a mechanic. Or you call the breakdown, the RAC, the AA, or whoever is in your area. But you call breakdown and they come out and fix it for you, right? If you're at home cooking and your oven breaks down, you call an electrician or the gas fitter, depending on the oven you've got. Whatever it is in life that goes wrong, if you can fix it, you fix it. But if you can't fix it, you get somebody else to fix it. But what happens when our emotions go wrong and we don't know how to fix it? And with the stigma of mental health, with the stigma of not wanting to go and see a psychologist, a counsellor, a therapist, and this comes back to why parents make great mentors. A lot of teenagers and young adults and parents don't want to be associated with the stigma of getting help through the mental health process. But what if understanding the strengths, your weaknesses, the changes, the root causes means that you can open up that conversation and deal with a lot more things from home by having an effective conversation? This was meant to be a 10-minute video, but I hope you are still watching, and I am grateful if you are, because there is so much you can learn and so much I want to share. And I have learnt so much on my journey through this and putting this strategy together. I have actually had a complete shift in my life to be able to leave work I've had to let go of my entire life as I knew it. Last year I separated from my husband. I lost my job as well. I had to be homeless for a little while, or at least no fixed abode. I had to move back with my parents and eventually find somewhere new to live. I had a complete shift in my life because I needed to do this. And I was unable to do it in the situation I was in because my husband could not connect with the emotions of me wanting to do this. He didn't want to be around the success of me growing my own business. He wanted me to live a simple life, get a simple job and pay half the bills. And I have all of this in my head. And he wants me to go and wash up in the local care home or work in a local shop and just pay half the bills. And I was like, no, I've got this in my head. I need to share this. Other parents need this. And the result was my husband and I parted ways after 28 years of marriage. That is the price I have paid to share the passion of not seeing other parents and other teenagers and young adults go through the pain that we had. Being able to find solutions much quicker, being able to turn parents into mentors. And the most powerful thing that happened to me that made me realise this was when, after 2 years of teaching my son this, he changed really rapidly at the beginning, but it was still a long journey. But instead of being a lifelong journey, we got to a point where within 2 years he sat there and he said, "Mum, I want to thank you for never giving up on me." He said, "I would never be the person I am today if you'd given up." And believe me, that was an emotional day. He said, "I know I've been a pain in the ass." He said, "But I thank you for never giving up on me." And that acknowledgement was so powerful, coming from somebody who had been where he'd been 2 years before. And then he followed it with something. You know, remember I said earlier about that ground being where, when he's in the pits of depression and personal development was out of reach, and I had to bring that back to a level where I could bring him up a level and bring personal development down to a level he could access. This book is that strategy of personal development at that level that can help somebody out of those pits of depression, as well as begin them on their journey of personal development for going to somewhere more successful in life. But this is the book that underpins everything. Any personal development book you take off a library shelf or buy off Amazon or borrow off a manager at work begins with this, understanding the emotional cycle. It underpins everything in life. So he sat there and he said to me, obviously, "I'm sorry I've been a pain in the arse, Mum," he said, "and I thank you for never giving up on me." But it was the next sentence that made me realise that where I talked about him, me talking him to a safe space day after day after day, and it was like him jumping back in. And it was like pulling him out of that pit or pulling him out of drowning in his own emotions, and he'd dive back in or fall back in. And I was just repeating this process for years. But he said to me, "I now know why steel is forged in the fire." He said, "The more you go through it, the tougher you get." And it was like, wow, relief. And it was like that moment where I realised that I no longer had to save my son day after day after day. That he felt like he was safe. I knew he was safe emotionally. And it was a point where I also knew that instead of me having to, I still mentor him, don't get me wrong, this is now 6 years after that, I still support and mentor him, but a lot less frequently, but he knows he can turn to me for help. Instead of me trying to constantly go to him and say, "How are you doing, what are you doing," and open up that conversation, I know he'll pick the phone up and call me. But it was such a moment of freedom and relief for me to hear him say that I knew that he understood. I knew that he understood the importance of the emotional cycle here. I knew that he was out of depression. I knew he felt relaxed, he felt happy, he felt motivated and could take action. And I knew that he understood this enough that when he felt out of sync, he could reflect on it in his own way. He could know when to ask for help. He knew when to call me and say, "Mum, I don't feel right today. I feel sad, I feel angry, I feel whatever he felt." But it gave him a way of talking about his emotions, building up his vocabulary around this. So it's not even about the words I put with it. It was about understanding his vocabulary around the emotional cycle and giving him a way of explaining that to me. I am going to really start winding this down because I expected, as I say, this to be a 10-minute introduction. But there is so much that I want to share with you through this system and strategy, that I am beginning with masterclasses where you get a chance to learn about this emotional cycle in a way that you can start to take that conversation to teenagers and young adults. I really want to help, and I want to see other parents sit down with their teenagers and have that conversation, like the day my son and I were sitting there and he was saying, thank you for never giving up. When he was saying, I now know I'm safe emotionally. I now know why steel is forged in the fire. I want to see other parents find that safe space where life can begin to move forward positively, where the stress and the strain and the anxiety is removed, and you come back to being a whole family, not just a dysfunctional family even, and it's not an intentional dysfunctional, it's just stressful. And teenagers going through depression put stress and strain on marriage and relationships as well. And one of the most important things was my son used to say, oh, I don't want to trouble you with my problems, I don't want to be a burden. And I used to say to him, actually, it worries me more that you don't talk to me. When you do talk to me, we can find solutions. But it was opening up that conversation with him was so important. And if you do venture into buying the book and you want to go the route of reading and working through that, every single section in the book has a parent toolbox, the section in grey. So all the way through there are these parent toolboxes where every single item on the index is talked through in the book as though I'm having a conversation with a teenager. And I've written the book in exactly the same way as I would have said to my son, here's a lesson, here's what I want to teach you, here's what I want to help you to understand. Here's some, and every single section has got lessons for them to reflect on. How are you feeling? What have you been going through? What do you want to feel? How can you make some changes? What's changed? Where can you get help? So it teaches them this strategy throughout the book about thinking for themselves. The whole book is about teaching them to think with an open mind and think freely and think for themselves, as well as recognising when to say, do you know what, I am stuck there and I need to ask for help. Or I need to turn to my parents and say to them, Mum, Dad, what can you help me with? Or turn to their school teachers and say, I need help with this. Right? Instead, and not feel like they should be judged, or if they are judged, to not see that as actually them being judged, but that's actually more of a reflection of the person who's making the judgment, and being able to handle that and cope with it and find strategies for that. So it's about teaching them that whole process. So every single section in this book takes through a process, but from a parent's point of view, if your teenager is not yet in the state of mind to read this book, this gives you the ability to read it on their behalf, and every single section, it then gives you that parent toolbox at the end to say, here's the lesson, here's how you can open that up as a conversation with them. I'll give you a little example if you like, and I did say I'll wind up. Let me find a short one. So parent toolbox, having a conversation that follows on from being lost, is about clarifying the here and now. This helps recognise and list down or create a new mind map of all the good things that your teenager has as a starting point for their journey, a bit like listing the equipment in their backpack, such as a sweater, compass, torch and map. What do they have? Compassion, skill set, favourite topic, family or support. Whatever they can identify as strength, skill or tool for their journey will empower them to see the possibilities ahead. So it's about whatever I've taught in that section, that parent toolbox. It just gives you those little tips and tools for sitting down and saying, okay, so this must have talked about mind maps in this section. And then talk about creating that list or that mind map and finding the strengths from within it. and recognizing when you're lost. I know what this bit is. When you are lost and you want to find your way, like if you're out orienteering or out on a journey and you're out roaming through the woods or the mountains, wherever, and you want to find your way, what equipment do you need in your backpack? What have you got and what are you missing? And it's those bits that are missing where they need to start to find help from other people. And it's about using all these analogies and having those conversations. So all the way through the entire book, there are literally about every half a dozen pages in there, there is a toolbox for talking to your teenager or young adult. Thank you, and I'm not kidding you, thank you from the bottom of my heart if you are actually still listening, because you really must want to do something to help somebody, or know somebody who wants help, or must feel there's something of value in this for you. So please do feel free to contact me, feel free to share this video. I'm always open to comments and feedback if there's something else you want to know. But what I will be doing below this video is dropping a link to my Facebook group. So if you're not ready to take any further action on this but want to follow further, I'm available on Facebook, I'm available on LinkedIn, and you can contact me through either of those. But the Facebook group, I have daily interactions. So if you're just struggling with your own stress as a parent, I do daily interactions in there for you to take care of yourself as well. Because it's really important that parents have an element of self-care, self-love, and learn your own personal development tips, tricks and strategies along the way. So come and have some space out as a parent in the parent group on Facebook, and that link will be in the description below. Come and join on LinkedIn as well. So if you're more about networking, maybe you're somebody who works in a profession or connected with people who you think this might be helpful for, come and join me on LinkedIn. And also I'll put the link down below to Eventbrite, where anything that I hold masterclasses for, or day-long courses or other events in the future, I will be listing them on Eventbrite. So please come, follow any of those links. And I will also link in the description below to the book, which is available on Amazon. And I will put a link to the website where everything about the book, the masterclasses, everything is all available from there as well. So that the website is the hub for everything, but I'll put the other links in directly for you as well, because it just makes it easier for you. So again, thank you so much. I'm so grateful. I am really and truly grateful. But I must wind up now because I've realised the time's gone by and I'm missing a meeting. So I thank you so much indeed, and catch the links below, put a thumbs up if you like the video, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon, or speaking with you within the social media. Thank you.